So someone recently asked me a question on Ask FM, and it was a pretty good question. I believe they asked some other people too, and I could have written my answer, but I thought I'd make a video because it's a pretty involved subject, and I have quite a bit to say about it. So, why do you care if people have children? Isn't it their choice? And why should they feel pressured and guilty about it? If you view it purely biologically, you can say Tesla was a genetic dead end, which is true, but who cares? We're all going to die. Well, I'd say in the case of Tesla, all of those, this isn't even really part of my answer, but in that case, all of those inventive genes, like if you believe in the biological or nature versus nurture, if you believe in nature, you would say all of those genes that made Tesla this great inventor were lost when he became a genetic dead end. But actually, that's not really necessarily my argument for having children in the case of individuals, because most of us are not inventors. But my real answer is, I guess if people really truly do not want to reproduce, that is, at the end of the day, that is their decision. I don't think anyone should be forced to. But I do think that it sort of goes against our biological imperative, and I think if people weren't propagandized to think that raising children is kind of not so fun, I think they would maybe want to, because everything that we are geared to do in life is basically for the purpose of reproduction. Like, for example, if you are a guy and you have like some super fancy job, it's to attract women, and you're not necessarily having this in mind, but when you're attracting women, you're trying to attract the mate, and that is geared towards reproduction. So I know, yeah, people have made that argument that basically everything we do, like people say, oh, like all of neuroreaction, this is just to get women because women are attracted to men who... Anyway, I guess the reason I am passionate about this issue is because I, like every single day almost, it seems like when I'm on Facebook and social media, I see this like constant, never-ending barrage of anti-natalist, anti-family propaganda. It's just everywhere all the time, like Elite Daily, like 6 reasons you're not ready to have kids, 6 reasons you should go on this fancy trip instead of having kids, 10 reasons you should just love being single, just all of this stuff. Like, I don't know who's writing it, if it's like to try to justify, like maybe these people really want kids and they're not getting them, so they're trying to like justify it. I think that's like a part of it. Like a lot of young women, they do have this drive, but it's not really socially acceptable to be like, hey, like I want a family. It's more socially acceptable to be like, yeah, like I'm single and, you know, I'm just okay with it. I'm just focusing on me right now, because we live in a really like selfish culture where like being dependent on someone else or wanting dependence and being independent is like the highest virtue. It's seen as a weakness if you are dependent on another person, like a husband or a family, which is really sad in my opinion, because it makes everyone sort of alienated from each other. So the other reason, I mean, another one of the reasons I think is that like having a family is kind of an essential part of life. Like it's a part of the life cycle. Like all of our ancestors, not even just humans, like up from like protozoa, like they're all like the only reason we're here is because they had that drive to reproduce. Like I do think it's a natural part of human life is to have a family. I don't think like living alone in an apartment, super atomized, is really a healthy way to live. It's kind of like how people are super against like solitary confinement. It's because it's so horrible. Like, I don't think humans are meant to be in periods of solitude for a long time. I think you see when that happens, people go crazy. Like, you have this image of like the crazy old cat lady, the crazy spinster, or like the crazy old man by himself. And I just think it's really unnatural for people to be living in boxes by themselves forever, especially, you know, into their old age when no one's gonna be able to take care of them if they don't have a family. So I think like having a family is probably more fulfilling than getting some fancy job or fancy trip or any of these accomplishments, because I think like the most important part of life is like having relationships with other people. Everything else is kind of secondary. Like, if you have all these accomplishments but you're just alone, you have no one to share it with, like, that sounds really unfulfilling, unless you're like a psychopath or something. But, and I say this as a somewhat introverted person. I mean, I'm not super introverted, but I do like my alone time, so I'm not crazy outgoing. Yeah, so I think basically as a biological need, we need relationships, and this is the most ancient and effective way to fulfill this need. The last reason I think it's important for people to have children is the most pragmatic reason. I don't know what the future is going to be like, but I don't know who is going to take care of all of these single childless people as the country, as our future becomes more uncertain. I don't know if these people are assuming the welfare state is going to take care of them, but I don't really see that happening. You know, with all of the like anti-white propaganda, like all of these aging white people without families, I don't know if they're expecting non-whites who hate them to take care of them. But, you know, in other countries, like in third world countries, like multiple generation households are the norm. The reason a lot of people have children in third world countries is so someone will be able to take care of them when they're elderly. And I know like the nursing home is the norm right now, but, you know, that might not be able to be the case in the future. So I think it's, you know, like an extra layer of security, or just, you know, even if you are the nursing home, just having someone to visit you. Because nursing homes are not fun places. The other thing that I could see happening in the future would be, I definitely think euthanasia is going to become legal. And right now, you know, we're seeing a lot of calls for it to be legalized. And it's always like, it would only take place in the most dire situation, you know. But it's kind of a slippery slope. It kind of reminds me of like, I'm sure when abortion was legalized, it was always like, this is only going to be if someone was raped, this is the last resort. But like now we're seeing it becoming a lot more common and destigmatized. Like I see stuff all the time. Well, these women, I didn't feel guilty. I shouldn't be shamed for my abortion. So I think, you know, that's kind of how this stuff goes. Like first it's legalized and it's still stigmatized, but then eventually it's destigmatized and then it becomes normalized. So yeah, I think a lot of these elderly people in the future without children are going to be euthanizing themselves, and people will be saying this is normal and this is fine, let them do it because they're unhappy and they should have choice, because, you know, individual choice is the most important thing. But is that really the kind of society we want? A society that doesn't value human life? Like, maybe the answer is not to legalize ways for people to end their misery, but maybe we can prevent some of this misery from happening in the first place, like by encouraging people to form families and form relationships so they're not lonely and suicidal and depressed when they're in their old age. And maybe they can have a family, maybe they can have a grandchild. I think I've heard that's like a really fulfilling thing to have. So, you know, yeah, that's why I think people should have children. And I guess, yeah, I think smart people should have children too, because if they don't, there won't be any smart people anymore. So I guess that's the Tesla argument. And I guess you can say, I'll be dead, so why do I care? But, I mean, would you say you don't care about what happens to your children after you're dead? If you do, that's pretty heartless. But, yeah. I think that's all of the reasons I can think of right now. Thanks.